back. Hitting for the Cycle is back, and we're ready for the 2024 Major League Baseball season. As you can see, the show's a little different setup for this season, and I have a new co-host. This is Ben Kruse. Ben, it's a pleasure to have you joining me for this upcoming baseball season. You excited?
Yeah, Ryan. Pleasure to obviously be here for this year's season. I want to thank Nick Morgeson from Empty the Bench Network for putting me on. And it's funny enough that I have a twin brother myself named Ryan. So when he talked to me about it, I'm just like, let's make this happen. I mean, and the cool thing is, Ryan, is you're with a rival fan for this show, so it's gonna be a lot of fun. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, unique setup. Me, a diehard Yankee fan, teaming up with a diehard Red Sox fan to bring you the best content possible for the 2024 baseball season. Obviously, pitchers and catchers have reported down to Florida and Arizona, and the season's right around the corner. It's hard to believe that we're already getting ready for spring training games beginning next Saturday. We're going to get right into it, but before we do, there are a couple of things that we just want to remind you guys who are watching or listening to this podcast. Be sure to follow Hitting for the Cycle on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at HFTC Follow the Empty the Bench podcast network at ETB Network. Follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. And finally, listen wherever you get your podcasts.
And another thing too is our show is going to be sponsored by Wool Spreads. Wool Spreads essentially is a free app where you could put any type of betting lines out there, essentially over unders, money lines. For example, on my other show in Football Friday here on this network, we use Wolf Spreads, and I just used it on the Super Bowl. That was a couple days ago. So it's a free app. It's free, essentially money that you can essentially put in for any type of betting odds, for any type of sports even too. So for people that are baseball fans, you could do that as well too. Get together with some friends. It's a great way essentially to get in the action. So yes, our show is presented by Will Spreads, and yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. So a lot has happened, obviously, between our last episode and to where we are now. But we're going to start off with the 2024 Hall of Fame inductees. So there are 3 new Hall of Famers coming in this season. They were, of course, Adrian Beltre, Joe Mauer, and Todd Helton. And in addition to that, the Veterans Committee has also elected Jim Leyland. So those 4 in total are going to make up the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame class of 2024. Ben, speaking from my personal perspective, I wasn't surprised, obviously, that Adrian Beltre got in. I pretty much everybody knew that he was a lock, 3,000 career hits, one of the greatest third basemen of all time. Todd Helton was a little bit of a hit or miss because the fact that he played his entire career at Coors Field. And obviously, we all know the situation with playing there with the altitude and the ball flies out there. So, some people felt that he shouldn't get in, but others felt that his stats were too great, that he was a good, away hitter. He was a great hitter in general and a great ball player in general, and that he should get in. So I personally thought Helton should get in. The one that's a little surprising to me, I think, was Joe Mauer. Now, don't get me wrong. I thought Mauer was a very good catcher. He obviously had a very solid career. He didn't catch, though, 1,000 career games. He obviously transitioned to first base during the latter part of his career. I always thought that Mauer was a very, very good ball player, but personally for me, I wasn't necessarily certain that he was a Hall of Fame caliber ball player. What are your thoughts on this class?
Yeah, well, first of all, just congrats to all the guys that got in. Obviously, Adrian Beltre played with my Red Sox for a little bit, for like a little bit of time. He pretty much was well known to be a Texas Ranger, and he just was amazing there. Just put up monster stats year by year. Todd Helton, like you mentioned, Coors Field is more of the pitcher's ballpark, but he seemed to make it out of the hitter's ballpark with the way that he was hitting the ball out. And then Joe Mauer, I agree with you. I'm pretty sure I got the chance to see Joe Mauer play, and he's a very, very good catcher. One of the best wins I feel like in baseball that kind of gets under the radar. I would have loved to see my guy Manny Ramirez get in, but that's another story for another day. Yeah, congrats to all those 3 guys. And Ryan, maybe down the road here in the next couple of weeks, they do announce, I believe, the 2025 Hall of Fame inductees that will be in for next year's class already. So we could talk about that another time. But yeah, congrats to these guys, and just well deserved.
Yeah, and it's also good seeing Jim Leland get in as well.
Yeah,
Leland was a baseball lifer. He had a lot of success as a manager. Obviously, led the Pittsburgh Pirates to 3 consecutive division titles from 1990 to 92. That team was led, of course, by a young Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla. And then obviously he won the World Series in 1997 with the Florida Marlins. And then turned the Detroit Tigers around beginning in 2006, just 3 years removed from when the Tigers lost 119 games in 2003. He led the Tigers to the American League pennant in 2006, also led them to another pennant in 2012. So Jim Leland, one of the best managers, if you ask me, and a lot of guys just have the utmost respect for him. Barry Bonds even mentioned that Leland was his favorite manager to play for. So that goes to show just how much Leland has meant to the game and has meant to the players that he managed. So congratulations to him as well. And yeah, it'll be an interesting 2025 class as well. I mean, obviously the big names for 2025 are Ichiro and CC Sabathia. Ichiro for sure is a lock. Obviously, I
yeah.
think CC has a very good chance of getting in as well. So yeah, I think that'll be an interesting class to keep an eye out for. We'll see who else has the possibility of getting in 2025. But congrats to the 4 guys who we just covered, and we'll see them in Cooperstown in July. And now we're going to move on to the MLB free agent tracker. So when we were last on, some moves hadn't been made yet, but now some big moves that had happened since our last episode. We're going to start with the Los Angeles Dodgers signing Yoshinobu Yamamoto to that insane deal. I think it was, 12 years, I believe. And it was upwards of 300, I would think it was like $350 million. And obviously, Yamamoto was heavily sought after by the Dodgers, by my Yankees, and by the New York Mets. Those were the 3 teams that were really going all in as much as they could to get Yamamoto, and those were 3 teams that definitely needed some help on the pitching side. The Dodgers, obviously, just a few days prior to signing Yamamoto, had locked up Shohei Ohtani on that massive $700 million deal, which is still outrageous to this day. I don't know if anybody will ever see that kind of money again for a while in terms of contracts. But Ohtani, however, is going to have that majority of that contract deferred. So that way the Dodgers could be able to still spend in the offseason. And Ohtani and the Dodgers made a big impression on Yamamoto. And Yamamoto, like I said, heading to the Dodgers. And that Dodger team is very stacked, obviously, now with Ohtani and Yamamoto, and obviously with Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. That's a crazy, crazy move. What were your thoughts when that move went through?
Yeah, I mean, for myself personally, I was just crossing my fingers. Hopefully, he wasn't coming to my division, going to the Yankees, because I was really my worst case scenario after Ohtani went to the Dodgers. I pretty much thought that Yamamoto going to somewhere else was pretty much a lock. But then when I saw Ohtani's money got deferred, I was just like, oh, like maybe there's something else that the Dodgers are trying to cooking up here. And I thought to myself, the rich gets richer because remember, Ryan, last year in the playoffs, the Dodgers had a lot of struggles in the playoffs because of their starting pitching. I
Yep.
mean, they had Clayton Kershaw, obviously he's getting older. They were relying on some of their younger guys. I mean, Bobby Miller really wasn't playing a lot. I mean, it was really like guys like Emmett Sheehan, who's like, I think they're number 4, number 5. So they really needed to kind of upgrade their starting rotation. And they essentially got probably the most coveted pitcher on the market. They got essentially the best overall player on the market. So Andrew Freeman was not messing around by any means. And yeah, they got Tyler Glass now, who, by the way, for a lot of teams is a number 1 if he could stay healthy. So yeah, like you said, they're absolutely loaded. Just thankful that he's not in my division. But people are saying the Dodgers, it's ruining baseball with everything that they're giving out in terms of money. I think they're just trying to go for a championship. That's what they're trying to do. As Steve Cohen was trying to do last year, money doesn't always, lead into championships, but I think they're doing what they can to try to get it. So, obviously, massive gift for the Dodgers. And the contract overall, as I was checking when you were talking, it's 12 years, 325 million, including two opt-outs. So I think specifically that's a massive deal. Obviously, you add that with Otani, so just you're hopeful that you can just get the most out of them specifically because that money is just absolutely outrageous.
Absolutely, and it's a big gamble too with the Dodgers. Obviously, he gets a contract of that magnitude, and the guy hasn't thrown one pitch in the major leagues just
Yeah,
yet. But his accomplishments in Japan should not go unnoticed. He was a hell of a pitcher in Japan, had a sub-2 ERA the past 3 seasons, I believe, and he arguably is the best pitcher to come out of Japan. So I think it's a good deal for him and the Dodgers, and the Dodgers I think are looking, and the Dodgers I think obviously are the favorites to keep reigning supreme as the top team in the National League West. But obviously, doesn't necessarily matter. People don't really matter if you're the top team in the NL West. People remember if you're the top team in baseball. And the Dodgers, for all their success over the past 15 years or so, they only got one World Series to show for it, and that was the COVID season. So, they got a lot to prove, and I think they're tired of being, I think, disrespected in a way of having their accomplishments be overlooked. So they're looking to shut people up and finally get that 162 game World Series championship back to Los Angeles for the first time since 1988. So we'll see how it goes. There were other moves that were made during the time that we were on hiatus, and another one was just a couple of days ago. It was a big one. It wasn't necessarily a free agent move, but it was a massive extension. Bobby Witt Jr. signs an 11-year, $288.7 million extension with the Kansas City Royals. It's the largest contract in franchise history for a franchise that's over 50 years old and has had some of the best players in the game, such as George Brett. That's a great deal for the Royals. Bobby Witt Jr. is a hell of a ball player. I think it's a good deal for both sides. And the Royals, they've made some nice moves this offseason. They look to contend in what is a relatively weak, not relatively weak, a very weak American League Central Division. It's the worst division in all of baseball. So, the Royals could be on the rise, sooner rather than later. I think they're going to definitely be better this year than they were last year. And I think this contract definitely helps propel them into the future more. Or what was your thought when you saw this deal come through?
yeah, hell of a week for Kansas City sports. I'll tell you, you lock up your long-term superstar and Bobby Witt Jr., and then a couple days after, you had Patrick Mahomes, essentially your key guy, win his third Super Bowl. So just you talk about for Kansas City sports fans, they're on top of the world right now. But yeah, congrats to Bobby Witt Jr. I'm a great, great player. Obviously, I remember I didn't really see his dad play a lot, but I remember how good he was. But yeah, the Royals obviously. It's good for baseball too in terms of some small market teams to lock up some of their long-term stars because you don't see that a lot. And I think that with the Royals, like you said, they've had a really good offseason. They brought in guys like Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo, not obviously top tier pitchers, but guys that potentially could probably contribute to their team. And obviously the second guy behind Bobby Witt Jr. in terms of that payroll that they paid a lot to is Salvi Perez, who's probably their second best player. So it kind of makes sense in a way where Bobby Witt obviously gets what he deserves. And I'm really happy for Royals fans. I really just hope that they can just start to translate this into winning baseball seasons ahead.
Yeah, I definitely think, like I said, I think they're definitely going to be better this year than they were last year. I mean, the Royals were one of the worst teams in all of baseball. They've been one of the worst teams in all of
Mhm.
baseball for the past couple of seasons. And yeah, we'll see where they go from here. Obviously, though, there are still a lot of free agents out there, and some of the big names. It's kind of shocking that pitchers and catchers are reporting right now, and some of these guys still have yet to sign. So the biggest name that has yet to sign as a free agent still is Blake Snell. And not many teams have expressed interest in Snell other than the Yankees. The Yankees had offered him what I thought was a fair deal a little while ago. Off the top of my head, I could be wrong, but I believe they had offered him around 6 or 7 years and around 300 mil, if I'm not mistaken, or 250. I
Yeah,
could be wrong there. I'm just quickly looking it up. But according to various sources, him and his agent Scott Boras, obviously, they're looking for a deal like 9 years and like 300 to 350 mil, which I think is yes. So the deal the Yankees had offered to him was 6 years for 150 million, which I thought was a fair deal from the Yankees side. But like I said, Snell and Boris are trying to up the ante a lot and get around 9 years and $300 million, which I think is outrageous. Now Snell obviously is the reigning NL Cy Young Award, his second career Cy Young Award, and he's a very good pitcher. But he's not worth, in my opinion, he's not worth 9 years, $300 million. And a major complaint that teams have with Blake Snell, obviously, is he just throws so many pitches so quickly. He's done by the sixth inning. He walks so many guys. Now he's very good at escaping jams and big pressure situations, but he's just putting so much pressure on that arm, and he's going to be taxing that bullpen so much that he's just to me, he's not worth that kind of money. He's a very, very good pitcher, but he's not like elite, phenomenal. I mean, what's your thought on the whole Blake Snell situation, and where do you think you could see him end up? Where do you think he's going to end up? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of you looking at a guy like Blake Snell, like you mentioned, he's an NL Cy Young Award winner last year. Um, but it's pretty much been for him. He's a consistent pitcher, but he has a lot of command problems. He walks a lot of guys. That's pretty much, I think, one reason why he has not been signed yet is he has a lot of mixed results specifically. But I think the biggest reason, like you mentioned, is the money. And he's a Scott Boras agent, and we'll talk about in terms of a lot of these guys that are still out there are guys that are headlined by Scott Boras. So I just think personally that there's not going to be a lot of teams that I think are going to want him at this point in time because of what he's trying to ask for. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Yankees got him, just because I do think that rotation, if you look at it, after Garrett Cole, you have Nestor Cortez, you have Clark Schmidt. You're hoping you got a bounce back year from Nestor Cortez, but you just don't know about his injuries specifically. And then Clark Schmidt, you can kind of put as a guy potentially in the bullpen and maybe not, tax his arm consistently, specifically. And then Carlos Rodon, been seeing some pictures that he might have gotten a little bit skinnier. Maybe that helps out him potentially bouncing back this year. But yeah, I mean, I just think that if it's not the Yankees, maybe a team like the Phillies who've been kind of quiet. They might need some help in their starting rotation. I mean, I would love the Red Sox to get him, but they're not paying anybody right now, so I can't see that happening. Maybe the Angels, because obviously a team like on the West Coast that needs some pitching, but they don't really give out long-term contracts. So I don't know. It'll be tough to see specifically in terms of what he wants, but whoever gets him, of course, is getting a good pitcher, but just the matter in terms of the money because it could potentially be an overpay.
Yes, certainly. And another pitcher who's still on the market is World Series hero Jordan Montgomery, who obviously coming off a World Series title with the Texas Rangers. He is also a Scott Boras client. And there was talk about him possibly reuniting with the Yankees, him maybe going to Boston. The Rangers, it doesn't seem like he's going to be coming back to Texas. I mean, the Rangers, I think, were in talks with him at the beginning, but, from what I heard and from what I read, it seems like they're kind of done with trying to negotiate something with Montgomery. So Montgomery's still out there. And, I don't know exactly what to make of this. I mean, Montgomery is a very good pitcher. He's not as good as Blake Snell, but he's always been solid, throughout the majority of his career. If you ask me personally, I can only really see him either going back to the Yankees, or I think I could see him going to Boston, to be honest with you. I know you said that the Red Sox aren't necessarily eager to spend money right now, but I could see the Red Sox just offering him something, and him just so that they can get an arm, because the Red Sox pitching is so thin right now. I think if they just get like one pitcher, it'll make the situation just a tad bit better. So I see him either going to the Yankees or Boston, to be honest with you. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I was just reading something yesterday that Jordan Montgomery essentially, if potentially a short-term deal kind of comes into fruition, that he might be pursuing a team that's in more of a win state now than the Red Sox. And I just think, to me specifically, he's obviously not wrong with the fact of the way that this whole entire Red Sox roster is constructed, which we'll talk about in terms of our teams in a little bit. But he's legitimately been training in Boston this whole entire offseason because his wife is doing some stuff medical and stuff for her job and stuff like that. So it's just like the Red Sox need pitching. He's really in your city. It's all about paying him. And I
Mhm.
just don't know if the Red Sox front office wants to pay people right now. So it's just absolutely, um, it's pretty disgusting in terms of the fact that they don't pay him and they don't bring him in. That's the reason why. I see the Phillies, Ryan. I think the Phillies have just been so quiet, and they have Nola, they have Wheeler, but Wheeler, you have to take a look at it. He's going to be a free agent next year, and I think that um, you know outside of Nola specifically, if you bring a guy like Montgomery who can give you innings, he's been in World Series before. I think he could be a pretty good complement to a guy like Zach Wheeler. I don't know in terms of who would to me who's kind of better. I mean, I'll probably lean on probably Wheeler a little bit more, but Montgomery, of course, is kind of similar in the way that he'll give you innings. He's trusted. And he's also lefty arm, which is really hard to come by as well. So I could see Philly if it's not Texas, because I do think that the Red Sox would be kind of that third team as of right now, because I just don't trust them to spend money.
Yeah, I come to think of it, Philly would make sense for both Montgomery and for the team. So, I'm kind of leaning towards that. I kind of convinced me. Maybe I'm leaning towards that a little bit as well. I could see that. And the last big free agent name that's still on the market right now is Cody Bellinger. Bellinger, obviously a big power left-handed bat. There was a lot of talk this season that he would possibly go to the Yankees, or he would also possibly re-sign with the Cubs. Based on the way that things are going, I see him re-signing with the Cubs. I don't really know if any team is really that interested in him. I mean, Bellinger, he had a nice bounce back year with the Cubs last year, but you look at his track record, he's up and down a lot. He'll either be very hot or very cold. And there are times in his career where he was just ice cold and couldn't hit anything. So I think a lot of teams are just very cautious with him and taking it with a grain of salt. I don't think he's going to get a long term deal that he was hoping for. So I think from where things stand with him, I see him re signing with the Cubs. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's going to go back to Chicago. The only team that I could see potentially that's not Chicago would be Toronto, because I do think Toronto is a um, they're very right-handed, specifically in their lineup. And I think that you put a guy like Bellinger with guys like Vladdy and Bo Bichette, I mean, that could just make that lineup even more scarier in a very good division. So, but I don't see him leaving. I think that the Cubs are going to find a way to keep him. He had one of his best years last year there. So, I just think it's a perfect match for him to just stick around.
Hmm. Yeah, and this was not a free agent move necessarily, but another big move that I just remembered off the top of my head was Corbin Burns being traded from the Milwaukee Brewers to the Baltimore Orioles. And this is not something that we, as a Yankee fan and a Red Sox fan, wanted to hear. Now we're going to have to deal with Corbin Burns in the American League East. Obviously, Burns is in a contract year. He's going to be a free agent after this season. The Orioles, obviously, coming off an incredible season last year, 101 wins, the best record in the American League, and a remarkable turnaround from where they were just 2 seasons prior to that. And obviously, their postseason was very disappointing, but they're definitely a team to be reckoned with. And a big thing that they needed to do was get better pitching. Their starting pitching obviously has been an Achilles heel for forever. They haven't really had a legitimate starting pitcher in that rotation since I'd say Mike Messina all those years ago. Like they just really have not developed or had a legitimate starting ace to, get them off on the right foot. But they finally have one in Corbin Burns. Burns, obviously, a former Cy Young Award winner as well. Nasty stuff. Very competitive pitcher. This is a great move for the Orioles, obviously, who are now under new management as well. So the Orioles, it looks like the future is bright for them, and this is a big move. And the Orioles, in my opinion, just got better with this deal. They didn't really give up much for Burns. They gave up two prospects. I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but they were not among their top prospects in their farm system. So yeah, it's not something that we wanted to hear as American League East rivals, but it is what it is. And to be the best, you're going to have to beat the best. And the Orioles are the best team in the American League East right now. So yeah, Burns to the Orioles. What were your thoughts?
Massive gift for them. And it's just the timing of it was crazy too because, of course, the day before they got him, they sold the team specifically to two shareholders, I believe, and then the next day after, boom, they go out and essentially go after, the most coveted trade pitcher outside of guys like Dylan Cease and stuff like that. But yeah, in terms of the trade, um, infielder Joey Ortiz and DJ Hall. So, like you mentioned, they didn't really have to give up a lot. Milwaukee, of course. I think in terms of you look at it, Ryan, there are talks of potentially having Burns stay for his last year in Milwaukee, but I do think that they were worried about not getting anything back in return because essentially a lot of the times when you're in your last term of a deal, you can just go and not get anything back for anything. I do think that the Orioles did have a massive fleece when you essentially get one of the best pitchers in the game for essentially, a couple of decent prospects. I think you're doing pretty well. And the Orioles in our ready now type winning mode, they just, of course, need to get that workhorse, and he's a workhorse. Because the rest of their pitching staff, I don't think is awful, but I think that they just need to get that one guy that just like, yeah, now it's time to fear them because their lineup is absolutely loaded. They have one of the top farm systems in baseball. And now you put that with Corbin Burns, you have Grayson Rodriguez, you have Kyle Bradish. Bradish did really good last year. They, of course, had John Means coming back. He really didn't pitch a lot last year, but he was essentially a serviceable guy for the last couple years for them. And then they have Dean Kramer, who was kind of an underrated piece of them last year. So you look at the Orioles rotation, it's really solid now, of course, when you have Burns and then that lineup. So, like you mentioned, they're for sure to be feared after they won the division last year. And it would not be surprising if they won the division again this year.
Yeah, especially since they got their top prospect, Jackson Holliday, who's sure to make his major league debut at some point this season. So the Orioles are not going to be a fun team to play against this year. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, those
We
are the
play them
main.
first this year. So,
Yeah. So yeah, those are the main names that are still on the market, obviously, and those were some of the biggest moves that had gone on during our hiatus. So we'll be notifying all of you if any other moves come up in the coming days. They should come in the coming days, obviously, as we get into spring training, and hopefully we'll see where these guys end up and see what happens. So we're going to move on to our next topic, which is Mets president David Stearns announced that he expects slugger Pete Alonso to test the free agent market before signing any long-term deal with the team. And I don't know if this is like a negotiating tactic necessarily to try and start the wheels in motion or whatever, but Pete Alonso obviously has been with the Mets for a while. He came up in 2019, obviously won the Rookie of the Year award, slugged 53 home runs, and he's been the Mets' power source for the past couple of seasons since then. And Alonso is 29 years old. He's going to be turning 30 this year. And the Mets obviously are kind of in a rebuilding phase right now. They didn't make too many moves this offseason. They signed a couple of guys like Luis Severino and Harrison Bader, ex-Yankees basically. And so when it comes to Alonso, the Mets they got some considerations that they have to make. Obviously, Alonso's a homegrown town, a beloved figure in Queens. But there's also, Juan Soto is obviously a free agent after this season. And, there's been talk that the Mets would, pursue Soto and try and sign him to a long-term deal. Are they willing to do that and offer a long-term deal to Alonso, or are they willing to just commit to one of those guys? They got some choices that they got to make. So, where do you think this stands when it comes to the Mets?
yeah. So, I mean, I do, like I was saying off the air, I'm not surprised about this. One, because I think they're using it as a leverage piece. And two, Pete Alonso is headlined by Scott Boras, who essentially loves to play the leverage game for a lot of his players. Pete has essentially been a figure, at least, kind of the neck of the woods for me and Ryan. We live. Met fans, of course, love him. He's kind of like the Mets version of Aaron Judge, where essentially he brings a lot of fans in. They absolutely love him. And I think Pete loves being with the Mets too. I mean, he's expressed his love and gratitude for that organization. So, I mean, unless, of course, the money kind of bring you somewhere else, like for a lot of guys, it's a business. And, of course, things can happen. But I think that he's going to stay around. I'm not surprised in terms of the contract in terms of what it could be. But I'm not surprised that he said this. I just think specifically it's a leverage play. He had to, of course, say, I feel like now than during the seasons to make it not a distraction. So I think that he's going to eventually sign a long-term contract. I think that the reason why the Mets really aren't spending this offseason is because they spent a lot in the offseason in the past, the year before, and of course it didn't really lead to much. So I think they're trying to kind of take a step back this year and maybe try to go after next year, where there's a lot of great guys and on the market, guys like Max Fried, Zach Wheeler, and obviously Pete, obviously Alex Bregman. So, they obviously don't want to go into this year's class going crazy. So they're going to try next year's if they don't extend Pete. But I think that he's going to be extended there.
Yeah, I could see him re-signing with the Mets. Obviously, I don't really see him going to too many teams or having too many options, I guess you can say, besides the Mets. One team that I think could be well, actually, no, that wouldn't make sense. I was thinking the Phillies, but I remember they got Bryce Harper locked up at first base. That wouldn't make
Yeah,
sense. So, yeah, I think really the only team that would make sense for him is the Mets. I think he's like I said, homegrown guy, and I don't know how many teams are just a lot of teams already have first base locked up for the foreseeable future. That I don't really know if
yeah,
there's. I don't really know if there's any other place for him other than Queens. So I do think that the Mets are going to offer him something. I don't know if it's going to be exactly what he wants, though, even though Boris is the master negotiator when it comes to getting contracts for his players. But, if when it comes to that being said, I don't know. I think that, I think he would just prefer playing with the Mets more than any other team, obviously. And I think that this could maybe work a little bit more in the Mets' favor when it comes to the contract negotiations with him. So we'll see what happens. That's obviously not this season. That'll be next year. We'll see how Alonso plays this year. Obviously, he still has plenty of power. He has not slowed down in that department. His batting average, though, dropped considerably last season. He only hit 217. But, that could only be, a blip on the radar. So,
yeah. He got hurt a little bit too, I think, last year as well. So
yeah.
I think personally he just wasn't into that rhythm. If he stays healthy, I think that he is more of a 270 type of hitter, and I'll hit you 25, 30 home runs with ease for sure.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a lot of value that Alonso carries, and we'll see how it plays out for him. So moving along, some history was made recently. So Jenny Cavnar is the first woman to serve as an MLB team's primary play-by-play announcer. She will be the main play-by-play announcer for the Oakland Athletics. And Cavnar brings a lot of experience. So she served as a backup play-by-play announcer for the pregame and the postgame show for the Colorado Rockies. She brings about 20 years of experience from the broadcasting world. She's very knowledgeable about the game, and it's cool to see this finally play out. I was wondering, for a while, because we're seeing more women get the chance to commentate for Major League Baseball teams. I was curious to see if there's going to be anybody who's going to be a full-time play-by-play announcer for any major league teams soon. And it's nice. It's good. Congratulations to her. Obviously, when it comes to the A's, there really isn't much positivity to be said around that organization or that city. But this is really nice. And hopefully, she gets to call some better baseball. Probably not much better than last year, but for her sake, I hope that the A's at least put a little bit of a better show on the field than last year when they lost 112. Like I said, I don't expect much better, but like I said, congratulations to her. It's a historic moment, and yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I really didn't really know a lot about her, but congrats to Jenny Cavnar on making history. That's obviously a great accomplished moment, and we've seen kind of you know, obviously women in sports has kind of been a topic for many years in terms of them not getting enough value, and this is obviously, and of course, a men's heavy type of sport. I mean, obviously, a person like Cavnar could come in and bring some, you know, splitting of just the recognition. Girls, of course, can maybe start watching a little bit more of the game of baseball if they haven't already. I know that obviously the A's aren't, the team to really follow as a well-known team, but it's obviously really cool to see her, of course, come in and to make this happen. So I'm looking forward to, of course, seeing her call some games, during the season, and hope things go well.
Yep, me too. And moving along, we're going to get into our next topic, which I'm sure both of us will dissect a lot. This we're going to do projected lineups for the 2024 season. So, with the coming weeks, with spring training going, we're going to go through each division in baseball, and we're going to go through the teams in that division, their projected lineups, and give our thoughts and opinions on what we can maybe expect from them for the 2024 season. So, obviously, maybe a Yankee fan, Ben being a Red Sox fan, it's only natural that we start out with the teams in the American League East. So let's get into it. So obviously, me as a Yankee fan, the Yankees obviously made some big moves this offseason. Obviously, the biggest move was Juan Soto. There's no other big move that could equate to the magnitude of that move. They also brought in your ex-outfielder Alex Verdugo, who shaved the beard off and is going to be most likely a corner outfielder for the first couple of months of the season, until most likely Jason Dominguez gets back after having a Tommy John surgery on his elbow. So on paper, this lineup for the Yankees is definitely better than last year, obviously. I mean, last year was just a complete disaster for the Yankees from an offensive perspective. It was one of the worst offenses in baseball. I think it was the second worst only to the Oakland A's. The fact that they even finished above 500, granted it was only 2 games above 500, is a miracle in and of itself because that offense was just absolutely terrible in so many ways. Nobody could really hit the ball at all. And if I'm looking at it as a Yankee fan, there's debate on who's going to be the leadoff man for this season. Obviously, DJ LeMahieu has experience in that leadoff spot. So does Alex Verdugo. He led off a lot for the Red Sox over the past couple of seasons. So I think those are your two most logical options. Gleyber Torres also has leadoff experience as well. I never really liked Torres in the leadoff spot, though, because number one, he's not fast at all. He's one of the slowest guys on the Yankees, which is astonishing because he's so young, but he just has no speed whatsoever. I like a guy with a little bit of speed. And personally, from my perspective, I think Verdugo would be a nice spot because would be nice in the leadoff spot because he is a slap hitter. He makes a lot of contact and he's got some good speed. DJ has no speed either, although he's a better contact hitter probably than Verdugo, although DJ has kind of regressed dramatically over the past couple of years. So it's kind of a toss-up as to who the leadoff man is. I think at the beginning of the season, you'll probably see Boone shuffle the leadoff man a little bit to try and get a feel as to what makes the most sense and what works out best. But those are your 3 options for the leadoff spot. Juan Soto most likely will be your number 2 hitter. He's an on-base machine. And it's only logical that you bet him in front of Aaron Judge, who is obviously your main RBI man. The Judge will most likely be hot. And then after Judge, most likely it'll be Anthony Rizzo batting cleanup. Rizzo obviously coming off a weird season. He got off to a very hot start, then got concussed when Fernando Tatis ran into his head, and he was never the same after that. Turns out he was playing with post-concussion syndrome and was just dreadful for the rest of the year. So you wonder if he's completely fully recovered from that concussion. We'll see how that goes. But Rizzo's is also getting up there in age. He's a capable hitter. Obviously, he's a veteran. He knows the game. But, I don't know how much longer you can rely on him to, hit like 25 or 30 home runs, especially after an injury like that. So I'm kind of like, I'm ambivalent on the way I feel about Rizzo. I don't know exactly what to expect from him. I think, like I said, he's getting up there in age. He's still a very good defender. I don't really worry so much about his defense, but it's concerning. It's definitely concerning for me as a Yankee fan to see how he'll pull out in that number 4 hole. And then one of the biggest questions in all of the Yankee land, Giancarlo Stanton most likely batting in the number 5 or 6 hole. Stanton coming off the worst season you could possibly imagine. Obviously has a hard time staying on the field. Can't stay healthy to save his life. And just was completely lost at the plate all year last year. He was having such a hard time catching up to fastballs. He can't run at all, and it was painful to watch him last year. Now, obviously, the Yankees mentioned that he's doing off-season training, that he's dropped some weight. How many times have I heard that before? And he comes
Many
back.
times, and
Yeah.
I'm not even a Yankee fan.
Yeah, like he is my biggest concern. I am horrified, honestly, to see how Stan does this season. I'm beyond petrified. It's getting harder and harder to watch him every year, and he's only 33, 34 years old, but he looks like a statue whenever he comes up to the plate. I'm expecting him to just pull his shoulder out or something like that. It's just terrible to watch, and he's not even close to the player he was when he won the MVP award in 17. Those days are long gone, and I don't know if he can hit you 40 home runs anymore. Basically, what I'm hoping for Stan is for him to hit at least 25, 30 home runs this year and hit at least 230 or 240. That's all I can ask for, really. I think that's not too much to ask for from him. And I really don't know what to expect from him, but he'll most likely be your number five hitter. Number 6 hitter is either going to be Glaber or DJ, depending on where they are in the lineup. Or it could be vice versa. Stan could bat 6, or DJ or Glaber could hit 5th, depending on how things are going. The number 7 hitter, I believe, will most likely be either I think it'll be this. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. So you have Verdugo, Soto, and Judge in the outfield. I'm basically babbling on, but basically to cut to the chase, Yankee lineup's better than last year. I just don't know what to expect from this lineup. I mean, it's good, but you just hope that some of the guys who struggled last year, get better this year. My biggest concerns are DJ, Rizzo, and Stan. Those 3 guys are more concerned more than anybody else. They're in their mid-30s now. DJ's going to be 36 this year too. So, I mean, that's 3 concerns in the lineup, and also the catching position. Trevino's not necessarily a good hitter, so it's already 4 spots in that lineup that I'm concerned about. So, I mean, obviously getting Soto's huge and getting Verdugo's huge, but I'm still taking this with a grain of salt. So we'll see what happens as a Yankee fan. But yeah, that's where I'm at as a Yankee fan. I don't know if you want to touch up on that, or if you want to talk about your Red Sox lineup.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the Red Sox, sadly, in terms of what they've done. But no, the Yankee lineup I think is a lot better. It's probably going to be outside of probably Baltimore. I mean, I do think Toronto is a decent lineup, but I think it's very just top heavy at the right-handed position. I think the Yankees have started to get a little bit more balance this year than in past years. They had to rely a lot on the homer ball the last couple of years. But you bring in a guy like Verdugo, who he's more of a gap hitter. He's a slap hitter. I mean, Volpe, you didn't get the chance to talk about Volpe, but I think that he will get, into another great year. We'll have to see about DJ. We'll have to see about Giancarlo. We'll have to see about Stanton, because if they can, kind of get back to what they were maybe a couple of years ago, then that lineup can even be more scary than it might be already as it is. If they have injuries or they have down years, then I think it's a lot more easier for pitchers to kind of pitch around some of the top guys like Judge or for Soto. If they know for a fact they can be like, okay, this guy's struggling, we're going to go right after him instead. So, I mean, I do think it's a lot more balanced than it was in the past. It just comes down to health with the Yankees, because I know in the past they've had their fair share of injury problems, to say the
They can't
least.
stay healthy to save their life.
All right, let's talk about the Red Sox lineup, shall we? It's probably, I will say, I mean, I think it's a lot of like to last year. They really didn't add a lot specifically, unfortunately. They lost a little bit more. They lost Justin Turner, who I think to me was maybe the more consistent bat in the middle to 3rd to 4 hole. And he was only going for a year to like $5 million, and the Red Sox were like, nope, we're going to just keep on doing what we have been and let people go.
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't even offer him another 1-year deal or something like that.
And the crazy thing is too, Brian, he wanted to stay. It was essentially the representations are just like for ownership. No, we'll have to keep on spending more payroll.
What do you got to lose?
So this is a lineup as it is shared. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of shuffling in this one, because it's very young. But here we go. So number one is Jarren Duran at left field. Now, Jarren Duran, I think last year showed some promise. He got a lot of hate the year before from a lot of fans, specifically in Boston, and deservedly so. But he came in this last year with a lot of a vengeance. He can really move a lot. I mean, he was a game changer in terms of a lot of their wins in the first half because the Red Sox were kind of in that wild card, hunt for a little bit until that brutal August, where I knew for a fact that they were going through teams like Houston twice, they had the Dodgers once. I knew for a fact that the pitching was going to not catch up. But Jarren Duran, I really like in that leadoff hole. I know that there's been some trade rumors with him and Padres as of recently, but I think he's going to stick around. Number two, of course, you have your best hitter and Rafael Devers. Batting third is Trevor Story. Now, I don't know what to think of Story. I mean, of course, that was a high and bloom guy. He obviously can play defense, but his offense has been very inconsistent. Just I just don't know what to think about him. I mean, if you can at least get like half of the Story's production from Colorado, I can take it. I just don't know if he should be your leadoff. He's number three hitter. That's where I think you really miss Justin Turner, to say the least, because he was a guy that you could just come in and he could just when guys are on base, that was one of the most trustable guys I had in that lineup. So Story they have here at number three. Number four is Tristan Casas. He is the biggest fan for me specifically for this season. I think that his overall plate spin last year really blossomed, and he is somebody I think just outside of Devers that is going to give you power production left and right. Last year, Tristan, I'm going to take a look right now in terms of his overall stats, but last year he had 113 hits. He had a 263 batting average, which is pretty solid. So if you can at least get 25 to 30 home runs from Tristan Casas, that would be perfect for that lineup. Number five is Masataka Yoshida. It sounds like he's going to be DHing this year. I know that last year he was in the outfield a lot, but Alex Cora said yesterday said that he's going to probably be their DH this year, which I like a lot more. I think Masa could definitely – I don't think he's a power hitter, Ryan, but I do think that he can kind of give you a little bit of everything. He can – low-key has kind of underrated. He could really run the base as well. I didn't think that he had a hard time with that. He can put the ball in play. I mean, his second half wasn't great, but his first half was awesome. I mean, his first half specifically was a lot of fun to watch, and I think we're going to get a lot more of the first half than the second half. Masataka Yoshida. Number six, this is kind of when you start to be like, huh? This is kind of like, well, all right. Number six, Tyler O'Neill. He's playing center field. O'Neill was a guy that they brought in from the St. Louis Cardinals. He, of course, had a little bit of off-the-field stuff with the Cardinals, so that's why they moved on from him. The Red Sox think that they're going to bring him in and take a chance. This kind of reminds me of Kike Hernandez maybe a couple years ago. Just a guy that they're going to kind of bring in and see what happens there. Now we'll go to number seven, that will be Willie Abreu. He's going to be taking over right field for, I believe, Alex Verdugo. Abreu played a little bit. He's, of course, the guy that they had in the trade for Christian Vasquez from the Astros. And I think that he can give you, of course, 10 to 12 home runs. Probably going to be in your 250 average. He wasn't bad last year. I think it's kind of, perfect where he is right now in that lineup. Number eight is Vaughn Grissom. Yes, Vaughn Grissom was a guy from the Atlanta Braves. Of course, was in the Chris Sale trade. I don't know really to think about him. I know that the Braves, of course, were really high on him, but they really didn't have a lot of options to kind of put him in that overall roster because the Braves, of course, have a loaded roster. But I think Grissom would be a really fun potential fit for this Red Sox team. I just don't really know what to think about him. I think that his defense might be all right, but he's supposed to be your 8, and then Connor Juan will finish it off at 9. Juan was a very good catcher. I mean, he threw up guys consistently. His stolen base in terms of his throwing was fantastic. So yeah, your lineup. I mean, if I had to grade this lineup, I'd probably go with the C plus B minus. Not great, not awful, just kind of there. And I think specifically they might look at potentially getting a righty bat. Adam Duvall, I guess they're looking at a righty outfield. So Adam Duvall, of course, I think he would be great because Duvall was probably your best hitter in April last year. Rafael Devers actually wasn't your best hitter last year on the Red Sox until probably the second half. So, like I said, I don't think the lineup is really more of an issue. Now let's go to rotation. Rotation is, on the other hand, abysmal. And they've had plenty of options this offseason to go out and get this pitching staff to potentially competitive. And so your rotation right now, Ryan, is number one is Brian Bayo, who of course I think has some promise for sure. But we saw this last year, Brian Bayo trying to be your number one, and it's just a lot for him to put on, his shoulders. He has really two really good pitches, but his third pitch still needs work. Of course, he's really young specifically. Number two is Lucas Giolito, who they did bring in. Now, Giolito, of course, we don't know what type of Giolito you're going to get. Are you going to get the Chicago Giolito, who was very solid, or are you going to get the Giolito last year that the second half was, of course, out there on, he was over in Cleveland for a little bit because the Angels caught him. He was with the Angels, and the second half last year, his ERA was in the fives. So you just don't know what to think about that. That's a really scary thing to think about. But hopefully, Giolito can give you something. And then Nick Pivetta is your number three. Pivetta, I think, is not bad, not awful. I think he's a lot better in the bullpen, though. And then Cutter Crawford, who I think is okay. And then Garrett Whitlock, who kind of like Pivetta. I think I like him more in the bullpen. So they have essentially two guys in the starting rotation that should be guys in their bullpen. You don't know about Lucas Giolito. Are you going to get, Chicago Giolito, or are you going to get from last year, the second half? Brian Bayo, of course. Brian Bayo, you just don't know about his third pitch. And Nick Pivetta and Cutter Crawford's like, yeah. I'd love, of course, them to get Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell, because then you're like, okay, for a fact that you can kind of bring some guys in and maybe kick some of those guys out from the starting rotation to the bullpen. But you just don't know. So I obviously would love to kind of see in terms of ownership is doing, because I think that they were following other things at FSG and not the Red Sox. But we could talk about that for another day. So yes, that is my projection lineup for the Red Sox.
I didn't touch upon my starting rotation, which is an even bigger question mark than my starting lineup. Obviously, you have Cole, the ace. He will be your number one. Number two, most likely, it's probably either going to be Marcus Stroman or Carlos Rodon. Rodon, obviously, coming off an abysmal year with the Yankees. After his first year was just a disaster. Nothing went right for him. Injury after injury after injury. And when he did pitch, he got his ass kicked. So it was just a disastrous year for him. Obviously, he came into spring training. There was, reports that he had lost some weight and that he looks great. I'll believe it when I see it. He has just a long injury history, and obviously there's a lot of pressure on the guy to help back up Cole. You can't rely on Cole to be your only pitcher in that rotation. So there's immense pressure on Rodon, and he just never looked comfortable last year at any point during the season. Like, he was just getting rocked on a daily basis. And his last outing of the season in Kansas City was just a complete disaster. He didn't retire a single batter he faced, and he was so embarrassed that he couldn't even face his pitching coach face to face. He turned his back on him when he came out.
I remember that.
He did do that, and
that's awful.
That he rubbed the pitching coach, rubbed Matt Blake the wrong way, rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way. His attitude was just not good last year. He he didn't flip off the fans in Anaheim, but he basically blew them a kiss, like saying,
I remember that.
He said basically saying, "Kiss my ass," basically. So his attitude wasn't good last year. He just did not look comfortable at all. So he did not get off to a good start in New York at all. Already he's got fans calling for his head. So just not a good look at all. So there's a lot of pressure on him this year to stay healthy and definitely be a better pitcher than what he showed last year, because last year there was basically no excuse for what he did last year. It was disastrous. So we'll see what he does this year. I'm just hoping to God he stays. If he can just stay healthy and pitch to an ERA, I'll set the bar kind of low for him. If you can pitch to at least a 4.10 ERA, I will sign up for that.
Oh,
which is not good. It's not good at all.
No.
But given how bad he was last year, that I'm setting the bar low for the guy.
I'll probably go what about a 2.5? Is that probably too?
I do not see a sub 3 ERA for the guy. I do not. Okay, you know what? Maybe I'll go 3. You know what? I'll go 3.8. You know what? I'll go 3.8.
That's fair.
I'll
give you that. That's fair.
All right, 3.8.
Because I think 4 is a little too harsh on him in a way, because I don't think he's that bad. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that he is low 2s either. I think he's in the mid 2s, high 3s.
Yeah,
when he's good.
Yeah, I just think he was in his head too much last year. I don't know. It's not my business. Anyways, he most likely will be number 2. Then comes the wild card, Marcus Stroman. Nobody expected this guy to ever don a Yankee uniform, but he basically just said, "Hey, let me in." Banged on the Yankees' door and just said, "Let me in." And the Yankees obliged. They gave him a 2-year deal. And Stroman seems very enthusiastic to be a Yankee. He's constantly showing pictures of him as a kid on his Instagram page wearing a Yankee jersey or whatever. So he is ecstatic to be here. We'll see if Yankee fans are ecstatic to have him on the mound. So Stroman obviously is coming off a kind of a weird year with the Cubs. He's definitely not the same pitcher he was when he was with Toronto all those years ago. And his numbers at Yankee Stadium in general are not very pretty to look at. I think he's got like a 6 ERA pitching in the Bronx. But if he's pitching there more on a daily basis, that number might improve. But Stroman also has a lot of has had injury problems in the past, and he's a big question mark. Although I think this was the right move for the Yankees to just bring him in just to get a little more stability in that rotation, or just get another, like, I don't know, maybe stability is the right word, but maybe a little more of a better name than guys like Clark Schmidt in that rotation. Stroman, I think Stroman is going to embrace the opportunity. I don't think he'll be as, elite as he was when he was a Blue Jay, but I think he can win you like 10 to 12 games, something like that. I think his ERA will be between 3.50 and 4. I'll say he'll pitch like a 3.71 ERA, something like that. That's if he can pitch to at least a 3.7, I will sign up for that. So I think that's fair enough to expect that from him. Nestor Cortez might be the number 4 starter in that rotation. Major question mark for Cortez, who was coming off an injury-plagued season last year. He just has a very hard time getting through the lineup the third time around. When he would face the lineup for the third time, his ERA would just spike up, and he would get hit very, very hard, and he was just out of gas before you could blink. So he only lasted for the majority of his starts 5 or 6 innings maximum. And it's going to be, I just don't see Cortez staying healthy or durable the whole season. I just think an IL stint is just a matter of time at some point during the season. No matter what, with this Yankee rotation, there's going to be an injury with one of these guys. I don't see how this rotation is going to stay healthy throughout the entire year. It's impossible if you ask me. So the Yankees, depth in the pitching department is very thin because they gave up a lot to get Juan Soto. So, they're going to have to, look towards the farm and maybe call up somebody like Clayton Beeter, or there was another guy who I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
Luis Hill?
Luis Hill, yes. But Luis Hill is also coming off Tommy John surgery. So that's another big question mark as well. I think Hill will make an appearance or two during this season. I don't really have much expectations for him, though. He's not going to be in the rotation at all for like a long stretch of time, unless one of these guys, if they have no other choice, then they'll have to bring him up. But I don't really see Heel being around too much this season. And finally, in this rotation is Clark Schmidt. Schmidt got off to a very tough start last year, but he actually got a little better as the season went along. He started pitching better. But his problem is a lot like Cortez's. He gets tired the third time around. He faces the lineup, and he just falls apart. He's got to learn how to pitch a little deeper into games. So the Yankees' 4 and 5 hole starters are definitely a little more concerning than their 1 through 3. But there's just all these guys have had injury problems in the past. A lot of these guys have had injury problems in the past, and like I said, I just don't see this rotation staying together the whole year without having at least a couple of IL stints here and there. So we'll see what happens. And it's a very thin rotation, or it's very thin, bullpen options that the Yankees have. So that's where I stand on the Yankees in terms of their hitting and their pitching. And obviously, the rest of the American League East, we'll get into them a little bit. We're kind of running out of time here. But we're going to go on to our final topic, and it's kind of a strange topic, but I think it's one that's worth discussing. So the new Nike jerseys that are being released for this year are being destroyed by players and fans. A lot of them are calling these cartoonish looking with the thinner fonts and the more curves around the numbers and the last names. I took a look at the pictures. I don't know. I mean, I don't really necessarily have to worry about that so much because the Yankees have the classic font or that they have for their jersey numbers. But I am looking around some of these other pictures, and some of them are kind of ugly. I mean, they look cheaper if you ask me. I mean, I don't know if you had the chance to take a look at it, but what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just seeing some of it right now, and I just think it's kind of just there.
Hmm.
In terms of the Red Sox, I mean, of course, they have the yellow jerseys, which I think a lot of people don't like. Um, I like them in terms of its representation. I wish, obviously, they didn't, obviously play with them like almost every single game last year for them
Hmm.
to even try to win because they did well in the jerseys. Funny enough, but they're not the yellow Sox; they are the Red Sox. So, but yeah, in terms of the actual jerseys itself, I just think it's kind of bland and. Um, it just it's honestly just a money grab from the company to try to appease the fans and kind of just make a product itself. But it just seemed like they maybe just kind of rushed it and you know just kind of did what they wanted to do.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of complaints when it comes to things around Major League Baseball nowadays. There will always be something to complain about, but it is what it is. Who cares? In my opinion, I don't really care too much about this. It is what it is, and like I said, it doesn't necessarily pertain to either of our teams necessarily. It's for certain teams, I guess, that just look much cheaper than others. But yeah, that's our show for today. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we're very excited to be back. It should be an exciting season. And Ben, I hope you enjoyed your first episode of Hitting for the Cycle. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. It was an absolute great pleasure. And like I said, before we get going, make sure to follow, like, and comment to the Bench Podcast Network. You could all guys can follow Ryan on our Touhey
Sweet.
97, and then for me at Ben Kruse 144. I have it actually right next to my name here on the banner as well. So make sure you guys to follow on to comment and subscribe to all this stuff, especially with baseball season coming up. We will give you guys the latest. Outside, of course, the episodes here. Of course, we'll do breaking news segments in terms of some short videos. Make sure you guys to follow that stuff on there. But yeah, Ryan, I'll give it back to you, and great first show.
All right, thank you very much, and we'll see everybody next week. And thank you for tuning in.